Hello and welcome to the Hoop Troop podcast. I am Matt O'Connor, and joining me as they do in all of our shows is my cousin Luke Drobner.
What's up, guys?
And my brother Mike O'Connor. We're back. We're about 3 weeks now into the NBA season. A lot of drama, to say the least, but also a lot of good basketball. I think, I think the first thing we're going to talk about is something negative. So I'll start with a positive, but I think this is the most players averaging 30 points per game ever, like this far into a season. So there's been some good basketball, but there's also been some shit. Michael, yes, you're raising your hand.
Question on that stat. Is that a good sign for the NBA or a bad sign for the NBA?
I think it has a lot to do with I think it's good because I think them changing the transition take foul, so now you're getting more fast breaks and more action. It is going to lead to more scoring, but I think especially too for like a lot of those players who are in that upper echelon of scorer, you're going to see it more. For example, Giannis on a fast break, how many times did he used to get fouled? So like I think it's a great thing.
Or even like Drew Holiday starts a fast break, Giannis gets out running and turns into a dunk.
Right.
But Drew Holiday got fouled before that could develop.
Exactly. Steph on like a quick little break.
Yeah.
So
do you think that's why SGA is scoring the way he is?
He's been, and I mean his breakdown too. If you look at his like levels of scoring just by distance from the basket, it's fascinating because he's driving to the basket a ton, which I guess makes sense. But he's still just a guard. But he does most of his points are coming from inside the paint, which I don't think you typically associate with a guy like that, a superstar guard averaging 30. But here we are. But speaking of superstar guards, before we get into the good crap going on in the NBA, I feel like we have to talk about the bad. And that is, of course, the Nets, and in particular, Kyrie Irving and everything going on there. For those of you listening to this who don't know, which would feel kind of shocking because it kind of extended beyond just basketball news. Kyrie shared on the internet a video, like it was a movie or documentary, something like that, containing pretty outright anti-Semitic, basically hate speech in it. He would not necessarily condemn it. He put up a big stink about it. It extended for about a week of, every other day he was getting up and being interviewed, would not condemn it, was very indignant about what he did. The Nets didn't overly do anything. The NBA didn't overly do anything. And then finally it all came in hot. The Nets ultimately suspended him at least 5 games. They've put in all these different stipulations of what he's going to need to do in order to get back with the team. Honestly, it seems pretty unlikely that he's going to do all of these given his whole demeanor. It took him getting suspended for him to finally be like, I'm sorry, which even the Instagram apology, it was just like too little too late. You could tell it was hollow. And maybe, he is going to learn something and they'll turn it around. But I just think, and we don't have to fully talk about him in this situation necessarily, but I think looking at what's going on in Brooklyn right now, it's a disaster. And I think a lot of people thought when they all were like, you know what, trade requests are done, everyone's coming back this year, maybe it'll be okay. It didn't even take a week for it not to be. So guys, I want to start by talking about this, but I want to look at it more through the lens of the Brooklyn Nets and what should they be doing right now, because they're winning games without Kyrie. I'm fairly certain, correct me if I'm wrong, they've won 2 of their last 3 without him. They lost last night, but they lost by 2 to Dallas. But they won their previous 2 without Kyrie, and then they lost last night, and losing to Dallas by 2 is a good loss. Durant has looked spectacular. He hasn't had great comments about the stuff going on with Kyrie, but Ben Simmons has been non-existent, and when he is there, he's terrible. I know they've had some injuries. What do you guys think they should be doing right now? How should they be addressing everything going on? Is there a remedy to what's going on, or do you just have to wait it out and it sucks?
I mean, I think this is a classic example of looks good on paper, but in practice, it doesn't work. You kind of understood that KD and Kyrie have personalities. They have, Kyrie obviously much more than Kevin Durant, but, I get the feeling that Kyrie feels that he's very, very important, more important than other people, which is fine. I have no problem with Kyrie Irving doing whatever Kyrie Irving wants to do, as long as he's aware of the consequences of those actions, right? He's lost his shoe deal with Nike. People are disassociating with him. People are just generally trying to stay away from him, and
For
that's
good
going to hurt
reason.
his. Yeah, it's going to hurt his ability to have a job next year. It's going to hurt his ability to make money off the court. So, he's got to live with those consequences. I'm sure it doesn't really matter to him because he's already worth $250 million, but usually not a good sign when people like Kanye West, who's always in the media about how wild he is and never really been with it, is agreeing with you and saying good things about you, right? Not necessarily the crowd you want to be a part of. So,
Antonio Brown surfaced too. Not the best
yeah.
endorsement there either.
So I just don't, I don't think that Kyrie Irving is going to make a comeback this year. I think the Nets. I think we sent some posts back and forth about how the Nets gave him those checklist items to try and keep him off the floor and try and keep him away from the media and things like that. So,
for posterity, I'm gonna just read off the things that he has to do in order to get back. It's apologize and condemn the film he promoted, make a $500,000 donation to anti-hate causes, complete sensitivity training, complete anti-Semitism training, meet with the ADL and Jewish leaders, and meet with team owner Joe Tsai to demonstrate an understanding of the situation. And every report I've heard has essentially indicated that Joe Tsai is done with the guy. So that last one feels like a huge barrier to him getting back, even if he does go through all of those other steps, which we've seen reluctance to do. The ADL reached out to him and he didn't even go. He sent, family members or something. So he's already demonstrated an unwillingness to really get back there. The one thing, though, that has changed, he's suspended without pay. So maybe he will go through it and try and show some sort of change. But I don't know. I call me a skeptic, but we've seen for years he is going to drag his feet at every juncture.
Why?
He's an asshole. There's not literally that's what it is. He thinks he has this big, larger than life persona, and that he's like this big free thinker, and he's outside of the box, and he's like, this master of his craft, and he's like this intellectual on top of it.
He's a great basketball player. I just
right. But you go back, everything he's done at every corner, it's just been.
I mean, if we want to think about controversial point guards this year, we can also talk a little bit about Russ. But something interesting that my roommate mentioned to me the other night when we were watching the games, he was like, if you saw Russell Westbrook in public, would you stop and ask Russell Westbrook for a photo? And 100%. I'd be like, yeah, of course, right? Because Russell Westbrook's a good guy. I might not like the way he plays on the court, but
he's still a great basketball player and a good teammate.
Right. And I have no issue with the person that Russell Westbrook is. And then he was like, would you stop and ask Kyrie Irving for a photograph if you saw him on the street? And I was like, no, I don't think I'd want
I'd be
on a photo.
I don't. Did you say you'd heckle him?
I might.
I would think about being like, you're crazy.
Isn't it funny that
I would just walk past him. I'd be like, oh, look, it's Kyrie. And I'd move on with my day.
Isn't it funny that 4 years ago, when I went skydiving, I turned it into recruitment for KD and Kyrie?
I have a Kyrie Irving jersey. I have a Cleveland.
Do I have to take that video down now that he's bad? And I know I'm joking about that, but no, it is very serious. And so I think something the Nets have to think about is yes, realistically beyond this year, his contract's up. I cannot envision a scenario where he's back with that team next season. I really can't. So, do you try and trade him? Is there anyone who's going to take him?
I think someone will take him, but it won't.
You think before the deadline someone would take him?
Someone's going to give him a contract. He's obviously a fantastic basketball player. He wouldn't have made it this far. He wouldn't be so rewarded with all-star games and first team NBA, whatever it is, championship caliber player, obviously. So he's going to get a contract somewhere. Is it going to be a max contract? No. Is it going to be $15 million? Is it going to be $10 million? You don't know. But I would be surprised if someone doesn't at least offer him a vet minimum, right?
They're going to be 1 year deals from here on out.
They
have to be. You can't give them more than that.
I mean, talk about the guy who just shared his picture. Antonio Brown, before he was eventually out of the league, at least got a few small contracts here and there to teams that were he's so good, we should at least just try to have him on the team, the Buccaneers, exactly. Right?
Yes.
It's we will try and see if maybe we can get him into the way that our team does things. And it's not going to work, but I think teams will still try right now.
All right. So fine.
I wouldn't.
Maybe Kyrie is soon out the door, whether it's this season or in the offseason, he's likely gone. That does open up a very interesting transition for the Nets. Because obviously KD, including the season, is on contract for 4 years. Do you contemplate trading him or do you just still retool around?
I think about trading Simmons and Kevin Durant. And my objective is not to get what is the proper value for them, but to take back my picks, right? I've traded away so many of my picks to acquire Ben Simmons and James Harden and all these guys, right? And I want to have a future again. I would just kind of try and wipe the slate clean. I would trade Kevin Durant and I would trade Ben Simmons for as much as I can possibly get and try and look forward to the future. I would honestly very much consider the Lakers picks. I'd be like, look, 2 unprotected first round picks and some role players. We'll give you Kevin Durant.
See, I don't think.
I think you need way more than that. And I think you would get a lot more. The Suns would give you 4 picks and 4 swaps for Durant, plus whatever.
Take that.
Right.
You know? So
why are we why is the spotlight not on Marks more? Like, why is Sean Marks not getting fired?
I mean, I think he's close.
This is so interesting. And again, I'm just a random guy, but like player empowerment is awesome. And
we also, sorry to interrupt, but just something I need to sprinkle in here. We didn't even talk about Steve Nash getting fired and them potentially hiring Ime Udoka in the middle of this nonsense, which is a PR nightmare. Yes, but to your point, Michael, about Sean Marks, the Udoka hiring is a Sean Marks decision. So why is he not? You're right. Why is he not under way more fire right now?
Yeah, because of Kyrie. There's a couple things I don't understand, and maybe you guys can answer it for me. Well, the 3 questions I've already asked one. Why is Kyrie this way? I don't understand it.
No one can.
Then the next one is, at what point? What's the fault line between a GM who's trying to empower their players to blah blah blah, to completely capitulating to 2 players? Like, why are why?
But since their first day, when they're even when they hired Steve Nash, they're like, oh, Steve Nash can coach, but also so can Jacques Vaughn, and we can coach, and then the whole time they've been there.
So why was that allowed to happen? The only other scenario where you see that happening is really LeBron. Not even in Golden State, it's really not happening. Or at least you don't hear about it.
They run every decision by Steph. They definitely do. I think the same thing happens in Milwaukee. It likely look at everything that's happened with Luka firing that guy in Dallas. They got rid of the coach and that Papa, whoever, I'm totally forgetting his name. It was a Greek sounding name. But they got rid of another guy who was involved in the front office because Luka didn't like him.
But don't you feel like it's less egregious in Golden State and
because no one's an asshole. They're they understand what's going on and they're not being dicks.
It also might be more subtle. It might be hey, I've had problems with this guy. I don't think he has our team's best interest in hand. Do you mind taking a look at him and just understanding where we can go from here?
And I also I think looking at Golden State is a good example. You have someone like Draymond Green punch a teammate in the face and they're able to recover from that. Granted, that's actually an interesting point. Both the Nets and Warriors are 4-7 right now, so maybe they haven't quite come back from that. But there's just a different feel about those organizations. So,
okay. So my second question is kind of answered a little bit, but it's why did someone not slow their roll way quicker? And maybe it's the fear of you got Kevin Durant to sign with your team voluntarily. You're so afraid of him leaving and you're so afraid of him being unhappy. But look, we got to the same place. You gave him everything he wanted and he still wanted a huge trade. So
look at that everywhere. That happened with Harden in Houston. That happens all of these guys, except for Dame, apparently. You give them everything and they get upset.
Harden's a massive issue. LeBron's kind of an issue, but not as bad. I don't know.
LeBron's not an issue. The Lakers are a disaster in their own right, which I don't really overly want to talk about, but
my third issue is, what does Kevin Durant want? I'm still not. I think
he wants to compete for a championship.
I think he wants out, and he can't say it again. He said it this summer. This definitely didn't change his mind.
Why
And he
does
It's
just
about.
has to stay because he knows he's not getting traded. So it
I think
makes him
it's
look better to just be
I think it's
complacent.
a super, super, super cutthroat industry. If you think about who works in the NBA, right? It's like the the president of basketball operations or the GMs. It's the top 30 GMs in the world, or the perceived top 30. When you think about the players, it's the top 500 players in the world, right? Which means that these guys are all super competitive. They all have their own people and they're all looking out for their own best interests. So when you really think about Kevin Durant, we say, what does Kevin Durant want? Kevin Durant wants to put himself in the best possible situation for him to win. And, maybe the Nets did get a really good trade offer. They're like, look, this is the trade offer we want. They went to Kevin Durant. They said, hey, we're going to trade you to San Antonio. Kevin Durant was like, do not trade me to San Antonio. I want to win a championship. So maybe staying on the Nets is his best option as of right now. Whether
Yeah,
or
I
not
mean, you
Kevin Durant
have to
gets
think.
moved, he wants to get moved to somewhere where he's going to compete. He wants to get moved to the Lakers or the Clippers or the Bucks or a team that's ready to compete.
You also have to think. You get Kyrie off the books. It's a max contract open on your roster.
Same thing with Ben Simmons, right? Like,
You move Ben Simmons, you move Joe Harris, who's now eating up a lot of your contract. Like, which they will find homes. They're not hard to trade. Um,
yeah, it's just about managing the cap properly.
Yeah, and then you retool the roster around them. Like there is flexibility at some point in Brooklyn.
It's also like at what point in time does Kevin Durant no longer at what point is Kevin Durant no longer like the most potent scorer in the NBA, right? Like
Is
there
he
was
now?
there was once a time when you could say that you could put anybody around Kevin Durant and he instantly makes that team better. We see it with LeBron in 2007, 2008, 2009. LeBron probably could have carried this Lakers roster to the second round of the playoffs, but LeBron's old, right? He can't carry a team like that anymore. And same thing with Kevin Durant. So I think it's about trying to find the best possible situation for KD. And on paper, the Nets look really good, right? If everything clicked, if Kyrie Irving was just a little less crazy and Ben Simmons really wanted to be out there, like the Nets could potentially be one of the better teams in the East. But because they have Ben Simmons, who's a little bit of a diva, and they have Kyrie Irving, who's potentially insane, it just doesn't work. And that's just the story of it.
And I mean, I do. I think they have some serious questions to answer in the short term and the long term that I think we're going to realistically see those decisions being made very soon because they have to pick a lane. They have to do it. So I don't know. It'll be interesting. I am tired of talking about them because they've dominated the offseason and the beginning of the season just as far as storylines.
It's a
But
big media network, right? Think about all the reporters in New York.
we also just have to talk about it. It's unavoidable. But I do want to leave it at that. Now that we've gone through that and can kind of put it to bed until whatever the hell happens. I do want to talk about something more positive. And I'll stick in the Eastern Conference first. The Cleveland Cavaliers are currently sitting at 8-2, second in the East, only behind the Bucks. They have looked fantastic. They've gotten here largely without Darius Garland, who since his return, they've looked incredible. Do you think that I think we could go back to our preseason podcast. We didn't envision them being a top 5 team, did we?
I think I was quite bullish on them. I think I wanted them in the top 4 in the East, and
they're gonna be.
I was high the second they got Mitchell. I was very, very in, and I also think Mobley, even though it's going to take a couple years, he probably won't get my most improved. I think that was my prediction. He's incredible.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm very in.
Do you think they can win a championship this year?
Yeah, no. But Boston Celtics circumstantial. Someone's injured. Yeah,
I saw a video online. Do you guys know Thinking Basketball? Sounds like a little podcast thing. He posted some YouTube videos. He talked about the Cavaliers in one of them. It's like a 15-minute video if you want to look it up.
Is it about how they don't have a small forward? Because that was going to be my drawback of why they're not going to win.
He basically covers why we should all consider the Cleveland Cavaliers to be serious this year. And I don't think, they don't have a small forward, but you think about a guy like Mobley, who's so agile and his ability to guard 1 through 5 and things like that. They don't really need a small forward. And they played the Clippers the other night, and Isaac Okoro did a really good job of guarding Paul George, I felt. he made Paul George a little uncomfortable, obviously.
Except he is actually the worst offensive basketball player in the NBA right now. If you look at the numbers, he is literally the worst player on offense.
But if he comes in and plays 12 minutes a game and just kind of bolsters your defense a little bit with the second unit and gives some of your starters a rest, you know, if
then you're asking a lot from LeVert too.
Yeah, you are asking a lot from LeVert, but I think go Mike.
I was just saying, I think LeVert can do what he's being asked to do.
Yeah. I think LeVert's a really potent scorer, and he has the potential to go for 40 every night. Same with Garland, same with Mitchell. And then they have defenders. Jarrett Allen holds down the back. Mobley at power forward can switch and guard anybody. And also, like, let's say Jarrett Allen gets beat in like a pick and roll situation or something like that. Mobley's there to clean everything up anyway. So
it's really,
I think they're a really interesting team. And
to me, I look at the way they're constructed, and it feels so similar to what Utah looked like when Mitchell and Gobert were there. You have like this traditional defensive center. You have, a smaller guard. They had Conley there.
It's a completely different defensive situation, though, because they never had a Mobley type defender.
That's exactly where I was going. So it is slightly different. You also have a Kevin Love coming off the bench. Kind of, it mirrors like a Bogdanovich type role. Like you really do see a lot of similarities there. It's just like a better version of what they had in Utah. And so, again, we always used to say they're great in the regular season. Let's see how they do in the postseason. That's kind of how I feel about this team. I think they're going to be a top 3 team in the East now.
We have them ranked at 5th in the East, behind Miami, Philadelphia, Boston, and Milwaukee.
And Philly has not looked great, and Harden is now going to miss a month.
Yeah, which gives Embiid time to ramp up.
Miami, similarly, they're 4-7. Like, we are seeing some of those teams that we were a little higher on with some slow starts. And Philly really doesn't have an excuse. Like, it's pretty much the same team from last year, and then you just throw in PJ Tucker. I was expecting a lot more from them, and maybe we'll see Embiid and Maxey kind of go off here and kind of carry the burden a little bit. But I don't know. I don't think they're creeping up to the top 3. I think it definitely is going to be Milwaukee, Cleveland, and Boston now.
I mean, there's teams on like Indiana Pacers sitting at 7. Well, I don't think they're going to remain that high. Toronto at 5. I don't think they're going to drop super far. But
Chicago at 6, I think drops 2. Realistically,
I like Chicago. I think they'll probably stick about to where they are, sitting there at 6-6 at 500. I think they'll have a winning season, but they won't be a contender.
I think the bottom 3 in the East are definitely the bottom 3 with Charlotte, Detroit, and Orlando. Like, I think they're right where they should be. Then it's, it is up in the air because Miami's going to get better. Brooklyn realistically will get better than a 4-7 record. Philly's better than 5-6. I'd say Washington's about 5-6. Like, I feel like that's about right. The Knicks are 5-5. Indiana is 5-5. Like, they're probably going to either fall off or hug that most of the season. Chicago's 6-6. Again, it feels about right. Toronto's 6-5, like a little over 500. Then you get into the other teams. Atlanta's looked great. Boston has looked very good, and that's without Time Lord. And then Cleveland and Milwaukee, obviously. But I think I would not want to see Cleveland in the playoffs. Good Lord.
Personally, I think the only 2 teams that can beat them in a 7-game series are Boston and Milwaukee. I think Cleveland could beat any other team in the East in a 7-game series.
But that still has them being eliminated in the second round.
I'm not saying they can't beat Boston.
Right.
And Milwaukee. I'm saying that Boston and Milwaukee are the only teams that could do it in 7.
I honestly think they're better than Boston. And granted, it depends how Robert Williams looks like when he gets back. But because right now they're basically without a center. They're asking a lot out of old Al Horford right now. And like Luke Cornett. Have you seen the videos of him like jumping, trying to block the rim? Like they're in a weird spot. They're very good on the perimeter. Everything. Tatum has been basically an MVP candidate. Jaylen Brown has definitely gotten better. Marcus Smart is still, continuing with his defensive player of the year play. So they're still great, but they have a clear hole at center. So it really depends on how Williams comes back.
I also think when you kind of shuffle around the Milwaukee lineups, you can find a really efficient lineup, especially with Middleton being back into the lineup. And also like, us talking about, I guess we haven't talked about it yet, but maybe eventually at some point we'll talk about the Suns a little bit and how Jay Crowder still won't suit up.
Yep.
So you got to expect that he'll be on the move, and I think he would be a really great piece in Milwaukee if they can get a deal done. But obviously, it can be difficult to get that deal done. So.
Yeah. Exactly. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty there, but I am very high on the Cavs. I think they're honestly the probably the brightest part of this early NBA season so far. Like actually that's not true. Utah being on top of the West right now is incredible. Danny Ainge must be kicking himself.
I think Mitchell starting the season off incredibly hot and Garland missing a lot of time did a lot to kind of boost Cleveland up in the standings. And obviously it's great to get off to a good start. You set a good tone for the entire season, but I just kind of want to see if Mitchell can continue to play well, even with Garland coming back and Garland's role expanding as he comes back from injury. So,
right.
And maybe it's more of like, okay, we're going to stick with Mitchell here as our lead guy. And then when Mitchell starts to cool off a little bit, then it's like, okay, Darius, is it time for Garland to step up here and continue to be an all-star and things like that. So, we talked about 30-point per game scores. Mitchell's averaging 32 in Garland's absence. So
right. And I also think there's something about them. And we were talking about it more from a defensive perspective, but I think offensively, you look at the way that they can stagger their subbing with those four main guys. Mm-hmm. They'll constantly have either one of Mitchell or Garland on the court at all times, and that will keep your offense in games at all times. And then obviously you have Allen and Mobley who can carry their weight as well, but I think you can experiment with the four of those guys on the court at different times and see what works. And then you sprinkle in Kevin Love too.
Yeah. I think their playoff success is going to depend upon Mobley being able to cover large spaces quickly and effectively.
And I agree with that.
Because if you just run people into the paint and you have Jarrett Allen there to block shots, or maybe you take Jarrett Allen, they're going to attack Mobley. So if Mobley plays well, I think this can be a really great team.
I also think it's very much up to their coaching staff. I think they need to experiment all season with various lineup combinations and just see what works at specific times, see what works against taller teams, smaller teams, just really play around. You already know you're good. We've all seen it.
Let's understand how great Hoop Troop favorite Jetty Osman could be as the season goes on. I appreciate Mike being happy about the mention of Jetty Osman. So who knows? Maybe he'll step up and be locked down. So
really solid ninth option. Like it's rare to have the solid ninth option on your team, and he's definitely really good. And I'll add one last thing because I now have him under a microscope on my fantasy team. But Donovan Mitchell, more than just having 32 points a night, you can probably dunk on me and let me know that it's like only 3 or 2. But it feels like he's assisting 4 to 8 a night.
6 assists a game.
There we go. I was right.
I do think that to Luke's point, I think with Garland back, he's not going to be as much in that facilitator role. But yes, I think him stepping up there is very significant. And it's something that he didn't always do in Utah. So I think it is. It's huge for that team.
Yeah. I just want to understand the balance between the two, because obviously both of them demand a lot of usage. So
speaking of balance and big trades, because I think we all agree Cleveland is very good. There was another major trade this offseason centered around an ex-Utah player. Want to switch to the Timberwolves, who very much mirror what Cleveland is doing, but are not doing it well. They have had a bad start. They're 5-6, but they have looked pretty terrible. Gobert has COVID, which is never not going to be funny. But they just got blown out by the Knicks last night, which, look, I like the Knicks. They're my team. Getting blown out by the Knicks is a problem. That's not a good thing to have happen to you. So I don't know where to start because I think they have a ton of issues. Luke, I know you're a big Anthony Edwards fan.
Yeah, so, I mean, Mike just mentioned how he has Mitchell in fantasy. I have Ant on my fantasy team, so it's a big deal for me when people come after my guys, especially the guys leading my team like Ja, Jokic, and Ant Edwards.
His own teammate is coming after him. Cat's like, he's got to stop eating Popeyes.
So I think Anthony Edwards, just like we should let people, say whatever they want to say and deal with the consequences. Anthony Edwards should be allowed to eat fried chicken whenever he wants.
Yes, absolutely. But to my point of there might be a little dysfunction there. He's had a couple interviews now where he said, first it was talking about how there's so many guys in the paint, I can't dunk over everyone or whatever. And then after last night, he's like, we're soft. And there's an extended quote, but he was basically saying we're soft and everyone's beating us.
I do think there is a little bit of a motivation issue with Anthony Edwards. I think one of the critiques he had coming out of the draft was whether or not he really was committed to being the best basketball player he could possibly be. He's having an almost identical season to what he had last year, but you want him to see him take another step.
I think we all
Especially,
expected it.
it's only the third year, so and you kind of see it with some of his efficiency numbers, like he's shooting a career worst at the free throw line. The 3-point percentage is down and things like that. And I think that definitely has to do with him wanting to be out there and playing. And I've never been a fan of the Rudy Gobert trade. I am very confident that it's well documented amongst our recordings that I've said it makes no sense. Why would they give all that up for someone who doesn't really fit in their system, right? You have a center. He's an all-star. He's a, all NBA talent. Why are you making a move for a guy you got to pay for a long time, a ridiculous amount of money? Doesn't fit your system. And I think they lost key guys. I really think Patrick Beverley is a culture changer. I know he's in the Lakers right now, which isn't a great example of him changing the culture. But on like a young team, Patrick Beverley is definitely a loud voice in the locker room. And Jared Vanderbilt is such a great defender. I don't understand why they would give that up. And I think
they drafted Walker Kessler too, which I think would have been a good fit. Like they
got rid of some good Cat. I didn't understand the Timberwolves offseason. And I think the reason why we see it kind of a lack of effort from Anthony Edwards is because he didn't understand it either.
But
I
that's
think
a
he's
problem.
looking back like
That's an issue to me. And also, why are we? I'm gonna attack him a little bit. Why are we sifting under the rug his he had a pretty bad bigoted event this past
He did.
season. He came out and apologized, unlike some other people.
That's the difference. But not to get back to the Nets, because I don't want to talk about it anymore. But yes, you're right.
I still think he's an issue. I'm not saying that the Gobert trade isn't a problem, but there are so many players who wouldn't just put their arms to the side. Did you see that?
I also think that it's we talk about, we're trying to draw similarities to Kyrie, but Kyrie's what, like 33, and he should know better, whereas Anthony Edwards is 21. When I was 21, I was saying things that I didn't mean all the time.
But I agreed, and maybe it's unfair, but I think I'm reacting more to every time he has a press conference, he kind of shits on his team, and I think that's really wrong. And I think it's
100%.
But I think that could lead to other issues, and so I think it's something to monitor. But I'm going to sprinkle in this is one thing that I definitely wanted to bring up and kind of why I brought up the Timberwolves in general. If you look at the numbers, and Luke, I know you hate the Gobert trade, they're better with him on and Cat off than they are the other way around.
But I don't think the issue is Cat and Gobert. I think the issue is Anthony Edwards and playing with two bigs on the floor, right? So what is the off on between when Anthony Edwards is on with those two and when he's off and those two are still on the floor? And, I think Anthony Edwards works really well when you have one big out there, especially someone like Karl-Anthony Towns, who can score on three levels, who, brings a level of intensity that, we might be happy with. But again, I can understand that we don't like the attitude that Anthony Edwards is bringing, especially as the team's most prominent figure. I understand Karl-Anthony Towns is the best player on that team, but it really seems that Anthony Edwards is the face of that franchise. And what you want to see from him is kind of what LeBron does, where LeBron always has something positive to say. I think Russell Westbrook's a great player, and he's going to figure out his role here with us on the Lakers, and we're going to move forward, and we're going to be great. And you see Russell come off the bench, they're playing better, things like that, right? You need to see that from Anthony Edwards as well, right? And that's part of maturing. He needs to figure out what to say, when to say it, how to say it. But go ahead, Mike.
And I won't forgive. I'll also charge other guilty parties here. Towns is throwing shade at him for the Popeye, eating fried chicken and eating. Cat had a huge issue with Jimmy Butler. Cat,
yep.
They're not getting along, I don't think. And Cat has had an issue getting along with other players, and the players he hasn't been able to get along with are kind of the rougher around the edges and more tough people. Again, I really disagree with a lot of the way Anthony Edwards is going about it. Jimmy Butler, it's actually become kind of endearing. Everyone enjoys this psycho Jimmy Butler thing, but I see why that is really, really frustrating to teammates.
I see Jimmy Butler more as a competitor than like a psycho. I think that's why I'm more
And
and
on board with Jimmy.
I think it's the work ethic we've seen from Jimmy Butler. Like that
He's
didn't
come a
really
long
come
way.
out about him until after he left Chicago. Like that's when we really saw him hit this next level when he kind of became more of a veteran in the league. But before that, he was like a workhorse. He was a great defender. Like all these things that you want to see in a young player who like really wants to take that leap and shows the dedication and determination to get there. Like Anthony Edwards, like very much has that potential to be one of the best players in the NBA, but we're not seeing that same degree of discipline. And I think that's the difference there. You have that same kind of rough around the edges feel, but you're not seeing the same work being put in. And so, to your point, Michael, like I do, I think that is where you're being held up emotionally supporting him. Like, I think it's hard to when you see a guy like that with so much potential not realizing it. And maybe he will. And, you know, he has gotten better since he started in the league. But I think we all thought, again, and now, Luke, I'm going to circle back to a point you made before about two bigs on the floor. I think we all expected him to make that leap this season to be able to play with them, which is something that you can do and players are able to do. And I think that's one step in him becoming a superstar is being able to do that. And he didn't. And so I think that's a little frustrating to me.
I also think it's hard to manage all these personalities. They have D'Angelo Russell, who's the number 2 pick, Anthony Edwards, number 1, Cat was number 1. I think Gobert's had a little bit of an ego thing, especially, you know, the last couple seasons in Utah, we kind of see him come out and make shots at Donovan Mitchell, who we see now in Cleveland is putting in the time and effort to be great with a new team. So, you know, I also want to circle around and make a point about the front office. What is the direction of this team? How are you managing the personalities in your locker room? What data did you have that said adding Gobert is a good move? This is the value that we should be giving up to add someone like Gobert, right? They had a great season last year. If they had just said, what we have is working for us, let's see where our young players can grow a little bit and see if they can push us to the next level, right? And I understand the play is not necessarily where you want to be, but when you're, you know, when your top player is 21 and I don't know how old Cat is, he's got to be like 24, 25.
He's older.
Older?
He's more like 26, 27. Let me see.
Is he?
Let me pull it up.
He's 27, but even then, that's still pretty young for a player, right? Here he is in his prime. You've got, you know, D'Angelo Russell's 26, right? You have a young team. There are guys, even off your bench, like Naz Reid, 23, Jaden McDaniels, 22, Jalen Noel, 23. You know, I don't think they made a good, smart decision this offseason in getting Gobert, and it's now showing it. It's propagating through the whole locker room. Anthony Edwards seems to be having attitude issues. Karl-Anthony Towns, is he, you know, is he happy? You know, so I you know,
I have a front office question for you. Do you think about trading Cat?
No.
Does he's a free agent this summer?
No, he definitely got extended.
I think he did. He signed a big extension.
I don't think there's any way that Towns or Anthony Edwards will ever not be a Timberwolf unless they really are like, okay, it's just time to go to a rebuild. But I don't know. I wouldn't.
What's your solution then, Luke? Like, how would given what you have and you've made this big dip for Gobert, like how do you make lemonade out of it?
You gotta find a new scheme, fire the coach, and try and bring in someone who has a creative way to make Gobert and Anthony Edwards efficient together.
And the reason I pivoted from Cleveland to this team is because they have a similar feel. You have an undersized guard, like shooting guard wing, who's like a very great scorer, and then you have two bigs. One is more versatile, one is more traditional. You got to experiment. You just have to play with different combinations. And obviously Gobert being out right now kind of hurts that a little bit, but you got to find some balance that works. And I think it's there somewhere. It's just very hard to navigate.
You know, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I completely understand like the Twin Towers in Cleveland with Mobley, who's like super versatile on defense, has shown the potential to score from anywhere. The Timberwolves, you know who Karl-Anthony Towns is. What made you think that adding Gobert would improve your perimeter defense or improve your offensive efficiency. You just got guys down there clogging up the paint. You got guys who can't step out on the perimeter. I just really think it's a mess, and it's going to build. I don't think the Timberwolves have a bright future.
Huh. I still am a little more optimistic about them, but yeah, I think there's clear issues that they're going to have, chemistry issues that they're going to have to work through.
If we think about another team who plays two bigs with the Memphis Grizzlies, Jaren Jackson Jr. and Steven Adams. Steven Adams got played off the floor in the playoffs. They had to run with Jaren Jackson at center and the only big on the floor. And even during the regular season, I don't know if you guys watch Jaren Jackson Jr. often, but he basically just jacks threes on defense. Like jacks threes. And that's why Steven Adams can be out there and play with him, because you know when Jaren Jackson Jr. touches the ball, he's going to launch a three. So
pretty much. But all right. If anyone else has any other Minnesota points, speak now or forever hold your peace, because I do want to once again pivot to something a little more positive.
Just the last thing that I'll say, because remember in the text last week, it was some night, maybe I was just feeling some way about the Timberwolves as they walked out to tip off against the Suns. They played the Suns and they lost, but it was a competitive game for a while. But they walked out there and I was texting you guys like, am I obsessed with the Timberwolves? Are the Timberwolves a guaranteed playoff lock? They should be.
I think they are a playoff lock. I think especially when you look at the way that the West is unfolding right now, yeah, they're probably going to get in.
So my only point, and then we can move on to more of a success in the West, but they should be good. So they should figure it out.
There's always growing pains. And we've seen it with a lot of teams. So maybe they will, maybe they won't, but I think they have like a month to figure it out.
I think the Timberwolves right now, there's one team that I expect the Timberwolves to drop beneath them in the standings, and that's the San Antonio Spurs, sitting one spot above them at 9.
The Jazz. Come on. The Jazz are going to sell and like lose like crazy the rest of the year.
I have a feeling that the Jazz will be a playing team.
No. Jazz are going. Danny Ainge is going to make sure. Right. Honestly, Danny Ainge is like thrilled because all of his players now just increase their stock. Everyone's playing well, and you can just sell them and then lose a shitload of games. He's fine. So I think they're going to drop. I think realistically, yeah, they're going to move up. They're probably going to be a playing team. But
that's what you were last year. Well, like, why trade for Gobert then? You lost 2 good defenders and all those picks for nothing.
Yeah. I mean, I think obviously some things could shake out. It depends. You know, obviously we're counting on Portland hanging on. We're counting on the Clippers. They're a game over 500. Are they going to jump up like we thought they did? Because they haven't looked great to start the year. Then you have some teams below them, like the Warriors, maybe the Lakers. The Kings are not great, but they're not bad. Like, are those teams going to figure it out and move up? I don't know. So you have those other teams involved. So I think there is going to be a lot of fluctuation in the Western Conference. But yeah, they're probably a playing team. Maybe. Whether they're like a home playing team or an away playing team, I don't know. But
what were they last year? The 7?
I think they were the 7.
They were the 7.
Yeah.
So if they finish worse than 7 in the standings, the Gobert trade was a failure.
The problem is everyone else in the West kind of got better at the same time. Because like Denver got better, the Clippers got better. Like you had a lot of these teams, the Pelicans just got a lot better. So like, as much as like, yeah, I think this team is probably better than they were last year.
Because your team is so young, just by development and continuity, you would get way better.
Right. It's a very fair point. But speaking of development and continuity, I want to pivot to another bright story, no pun intended. The Phoenix Suns are 7-3, which after their weird offseason, I don't think many of us expected. They look great, but they did just have a pretty significant injury. Cam Johnson just got hurt. It sounds like he's going to miss a month or two. The knee injury. So they currently really don't have a power forward, like a playable power forward night in, night out. Like, I think they might be playing Jock Landale. Like he's their backup center, but I think he can kind of play the 4. Torrey Craig, maybe.
Space the floor. I think Torrey Craig has got to be their solution. Bigger forward, good defender.
But anyway, they are tied currently for 2nd in the West with only Utah ahead of them. So they're essentially tied for 1st. Do we think they need to make a move, and how quickly do they need to do it to be in that upper echelon in the West.
The Suns?
Yes.
Mike, any thoughts?
I think they're in the upper echelon.
But if you're going to go 2 months without a power forward and maybe more, you're not going to be.
I mean, I think the biggest task on their agenda is to move Jay Crowder as soon as possible.
Right.
And I don't think you're necessarily looking for a power forward in return, but I think you're just looking for a potential role player on a championship team. So they just got to move him and upgrade another position or get a pick or something like that. You got to get something for him because him just sitting on the roster doesn't do you any good, especially if he's unwilling to suit up. And Cam Johnson is going to come back at some point. So just bolster the roster really quick, get it done with, get it over with. And I'd look to, I talked about the Bucks a little bit. I'd look at the Bucks and see what I can strip them from, see if I could just get Grayson Allen or I don't know.
Or honestly, the Heat.
Yeah, it's a good fit for him too. My trade that I think I would like to see them do, and it obviously serves my purpose as well, but I do think it fits both teams, is if they were to trade for Julius Randle. I think it would be a great fit at power forward for them. He's another offensive option, especially as Chris Paul is kind of regressing from a scoring perspective. I think it would be a great fit.
I don't think the Suns should trade Jay Crowder for an upgrade at a position. I think you should trade equal value. I don't want to give up too many picks. I don't want to give up any young players. Right? If I'm the Suns and I have to trade for Julius Randle, what else do I have to give up outside of Jay Crowder?
I don't think you have to give up much, and that's why I think that they're very good trade partners. Is because the Knicks realistically are looking to open up time for Obi Toppin, who has been playing great to start this season, and it's becoming undeniable that he needs to play more. So I think realistically, there is something there, and the Knicks are looking mostly just to move Randle to kind of open up that time. They're obviously going to get Grimes and have to deal with Reddish playing as well. Reddish can play the backup 4 now. I think they could make some changes in there. And I mean, honestly, if you can find a third team for Jay Crowder, I'm sure the Knicks would be all for it. They don't need him on the roster.
I also I don't think it'll happen with the Knicks.
All right,
but
that's the one that I'm just holding it out there because I think it makes sense.
Something else that popped up into my head, there was a guy from the Kings who thought the Kings kind of hurt him a little bit and limited his options in free agency. Donte DiVincenzo, who signed with the Golden State Warriors. He's played 3 games, 14 minutes a game, not in their rotation. I think Jay Crowder would be a good fit for the Golden State Warriors, and I think Donte DiVincenzo would be an equal value trade who could contribute to the Suns right away.
I think the biggest issue in that is that Jay Crowder, the issue with him in Phoenix, that he doesn't want to come off the bench, which is exactly what he'd be doing in Golden State. And maybe he changes his mind playing with those guys. But if
Crowder.
What?
Jay Crowder, get over yourself.
Yes. If I was on the Warriors, I'd get over it.
But exactly. So that's why I think you got to find.
Also, if I'm the Suns, I don't care about Jay Crowder. You treated me with no respect. I'll trade you wherever I want to trade you.
Oh yeah, I think they have no obligation to meet his trade demands, but we'll see. I do think it's going to be a little weird. I think Memphis could be a good fit. I'm just kind of looking up and down now, and I don't know, Atlanta maybe.
I'm thinking more of if I'm Phoenix, who do I want back? So I understand we're thinking Jay Crowder goes somewhere, but if you trade into Dallas, who do you get off Dallas's roster? There's nobody on Dallas's roster that I think Dallas would part with that I would want as
Wizards.
The Phoenix Suns.
The Wizards. Send Porzingis. Just do a little swap. I do, though. I think he'd be a good fit with those guys. Sure, he's injury prone, but
But he's a center, not a power forward. I need a versatile defender. I'd do a Kyle Kuzma swap. Rui Hashimura, maybe.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm floating ideas out there. I'm not saying they're perfect, but
my co-owner wanted to
trade for him.
It was so dumb. Anyway,
I think last year Kuzma was on my fantasy team and he averaged a career high in rebounds. He averaged 9.5 rebounds a game or something like that. I was like, let's go.
Good for Kuzma. Good for Kuzma.
Yeah. So I mean, just I think the Suns need to find the right guy to replace Crowder with. And it doesn't matter what team he's on, they just need to find that guy and say, hey, look, you want Jay Crowder, he's yours. Tell us what we need to do.
Do you think underground Suns Nets conversations are happening? Or no?
Net for who?
I mean, I saw like, and again, unless it comes from Woj or Shams, I'm not really like trusting it. But I've seen things that teams are preparing to start re-engaging with about Kevin Durant. So I'm sure that's just hanging over everyone's head. The longer the Nets are bad and the longer there's drama, teams are going to be like, there's a chance. The problem is, though, when they re-signed Ayton, it definitely made it a little more difficult to get it done. But yes, I think they're absolutely holding out hope that something else goes wrong.
Mikal Bridges, Jay Crowder, and picks for Kevin Durant. Would that
Is that
work?
enough?
Not enough.
That's the problem.
I'll
Ayton was
sprinkle
kind
in
of the big.
Landry Shamet.
Oh, yay.
Landry Shamet's pretty good.
Although Shamit did play there for a while, so actually isn't the
that's
worst
probably not
idea. Yeah. But then I think I'm trying to think of other teams where Jay Crowder would fit. Probably not so much Philly since they got PJ Tucker.
How about, I know there's been a lot of talks about San Antonio moving some of their guys like Josh Richardson or Doug McDermott or someone like that. If I was Phoenix, do you think you might reach out and just say, like, look, Jay Crowder is being annoying. You guys have free cap space. We don't. We'll send like a pick or two with Jay Crowder for some role players.
Are you offloading 2 picks for someone to take on Jay
Well,
Crowder?
seconds maybe, something like that.
Yeah, like two seconds and Jay Crowder for Josh Richardson. He's a good defender. He's shooting really well this year.
I think it depends on how these teams value an aging Jay Crowder, and that's the issue. Like, it's very hard to say. I feel like we're comparing apples and oranges there. Like, Josh Richardson sure is, I don't know, who's more valuable there? The Suns probably think that's like an even straight up swap.
How about Jay Crowder for Alex Caruso?
Probably not happening.
Why not?
Caruso is better.
How about Jay Crowder for Ayo Dosunmu? I mean, the Bulls are in desperate need of a power forward.
Right.
I don't think Patrick Williams is necessarily ready to play a starting role. So you put Jay Crowder in there. He's going to start in Chicago. They're a championship level team. You know?
Yeah.
And you could do some swaps. I think Alex Caruso definitely, like, you think about like the Alex Caruso Devin Booker lineup potentials, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting fit with Paul and Booker, but I don't know that it's like perfect. But yeah, I guess you do. I think
man Alex Caruso.
They just have to do something with Jay Crowder at this point, and that's the reason. Again, I come back to Randall is you are still investing in guys who can play off primarily off of Booker, but then also off of Chris Paul and realistically not clash with Ayton. So,
do you think they need a scorer? That's like the other question. I understand Chris Paul. There's concerns with Chris Paul aging and not really being the contributor he once was. Do you think they need an off the bench scorer? Because after Booker, it's not like they really have a potent. There's no potent scorer.
I think they need 3-point shooters. That's all. No,
I disagree. I think they have enough guys who shooters. Right. I think you look at this roster. You know, you look at the Booker, Bridges can hit them. Chris Paul can hit them, but he's just not as great as he used to be. Then you obviously get into Cam Johnson was hitting threes. Shamet can hit threes. I don't know. Saric, if he plays, is not. I feel like he wasn't horrible. Torrey Craig is okay. But you don't need much beyond that. Which is, again, why Randall can hit threes. But whatever.
Yeah, but I don't necessarily know if I guess Randall solves like the scoring issue too. You can kind of dump it into him.
Sure does. He sure does. I'm saying it makes it at first knee jerk. You're like, I don't love it. But then the more you think about it, it makes sense. It does. Fine, I'll let it go. That's RJ, part of why I needed to talk about the Suns.
It gives RJ and Brunson some more touches. I know.
And Obi. Obi's the only one I care about. Get Obi on the court. He's averaging like 14 minutes a game, and I'm losing my mind.
If the Knicks traded for Jay Crowder, I have a feeling that Tibbs would play Jay Crowder over Obi.
He would, but at least then maybe it would be like Crowder gets 20 minutes starting, and Obi gets the rest. Please,
maybe.
God.
But yeah, I think it would be very interesting if the Knicks traded for Crowder. Now that we've walked through some of the potentials, I could see, at first I was very stubborn and I was like, no way. But
Yes, I'm
after I
converting
think
you.
after I think about like, okay, I trade Jay Crowder to the Warriors or the Spurs or something like that, I'd have to offload like a couple seconds or a first or something like that anyway. So I guess if I was trading for Julius Randle, those consolation picks that I'm sending for someone to take on Crowder would be throwaway. It would be dead cost.
Yeah.
If Mike wants to throw in like the economic term I'm missing here.
No, you guys are the brains.
I don't know. Just floating it out there. But I think we all agree the Suns are a great story, but they're now at a crossroads and they have to do something soon to address this gap.
I think everything would have been fine
if Cam Johnson didn't get hurt.
Right, now he's gonna miss what, 2 months, 3 months?
I think they said 1 to 2. It was I think he tore his meniscus or like sprained his meniscus, something like that. But he had surgery.
Underwent surgery for a torn meniscus in his right knee.
So, I mean, I'm sure they'll be conservative the more they win, but it's hard to win if you don't have a power forward on your roster.
Yeah, I mean, you can always play small, and I think you can get by in the regular season if you kind of look at the Bulls leading the.
But they fell off hard.
Year. I think when they've reintroduced Patrick Williams, and they're like, "Well, Patrick Williams is our starting power forward," and they realize that maybe not so much.
Right.
But they are getting by with like Javante Green and DeRozan playing power forward. Yeah. So you could make it work, but it's obviously not a viable solution in the playoffs. So
it's also hard to make that work when one of the players that because you are then going to ask the rest of your team by default to do more.
It depends.
When one of them is aging Chris Paul, that's hard.
I'd happily play small in the playoffs if I'm playing Rudy Gobert and the Minnesota Timberwolves in the first round.
I mean, yeah, to run him out of the gym. But
I'd trade Jay Crowder for Terrence Mann and Nicholas Batum.
Would they do that?
I don't know. Terrence Mann had a career high 37 on Gobert in the playoffs.
I guess that's true.
I'm excited for Jay Crowder to not be on my mind. Jay Crowder is being a weirdo. Like,
yeah, totally.
Wait, did you write down any takes this week that you wanted to share with us?
What else did I have in my kind of take arsenal?
Have you guys both been writing stuff down? I only wrote 3 things down.
I mean, we mostly talked about what I had. I really want to talk about Minnesota, Phoenix, and I mean, I didn't want to talk about Brooklyn, but we had to.
Yeah, I mean, I have one that's obvious. Zion is way, way more fun than I even was expecting. He's exceeding my expectations. Every time he's on the court, it's fun.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So
the Pelicans are way better than I expected. Yeah. Obviously, their record doesn't quite indicate it, but they've also missed Ingram and Zion for a little time. But they're really freaking good, and they're so much fun to watch.
Yeah, and I'm getting the feeling like when I don't like Duke, but you would put on Duke whenever Duke was playing, you were putting on the TV because you wanted to see what he was going to do. And now the Pelicans you're realizing that after it's been delayed gratification. It's the 4th year that he's in the league, but it's amazing. So anyway, there's not much I can dive in there. But then here's my next one. And you brought it up, Matthew, with Randall. Why are we not kicking the tires and we being the Knicks? Why are we not thinking about AD for like Randall, Fournier, and like 3 picks?
I think that's a huge mistake. AD is so injury prone. And like, does he solve anything? What does that team even accomplish with him? All it does is create more problems. And like,
just my take.
If I'm trading picks to get like a star, I want it to be like A, younger, and B, like more impactful right off the bat.
So has the ship sailed on AD?
If AD can't do it with LeBron, and sure, that roster kind of sucks right now, but like, still, you're 2-8. Like, if you can't win more than 2 games in your first 10 games, like, I'm blaming him because I think when they traded for him, the thought was like, all right, LeBron is going to start off as our leader. They won a championship in that format. Then it's going to progress, and AD is going to kind of be the number 1 option, and LeBron's going to be playing off of him. And that just hasn't happened because AD is hurt all the time and like shows a lack of, I don't know, dedication, commitment. There's something there where he's not dominating games like he did in New Orleans that I think everyone thought he was going to do.
Then I came out a little hot with the Knicks suggestion, but
someone should.
Why are the Lakers not thinking about it?
I think they are starting to. Didn't you see those reports that were like the Lakers are looking to non-Russell Westbrook trades? Because I do. I think like it has to be on the table. We were saying this summer they should trade LeBron. Like things that would help their franchise are they're hard pills to swallow, but they would help. Trading AD would help that team.
I honestly think that the Lakers are just at the end of the LeBron era. I think extending him was a bad decision
for both parties.
I think if LeBron was smart, he would have been like, "Hey, look, I really, really appreciate it. I can't do this."
Right.
Especially because, like, think about how much money LeBron makes off the floor. So,
oh yeah, totally.
Anyway, the Lakers are kind of sad, but then I've got two more. These are my only other takes, and they're quick. SGA is an all-star.
Yes,
gotta be this year.
Come in and start to give him the treatment he deserves.
So I think the issues are health and load management as they are
looking to tank.
Yeah, they're looking to tank. So I think that is where it might be a little bit of a hindrance. If he does get hurt, they're going to be super conservative with his recovery. And you might see him miss extended time when he doesn't necessarily have to. So I think that's the one thing to watch there. And I think that could impact his all-star status. But yeah, he's like, honestly, this season, he's definitely a top 15 player, is even top 10 so far.
Yeah.
Like he might be.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And
he's been super efficient. He's shooting very well.
He can stay healthy with Chet. And
Victor.
I think the biggest disappointment this season is Chet not playing.
It's a shame.
With Shea playing this well, understanding the inability for the Oklahoma City Thunder to shoot, I'd like to understand what they'd look like with Chet back, especially because he could probably offer a little bit more spacing for some of their scores.
Totally.
Yeah, so I think the future's definitely bright there.
Yeah, and Giddey has looked good. Like I think there is a lot to be happy about in OKC.
But SGA is like,
I'm a little concerned for SGA because the timetable, the timing of it all, right? Like to develop all of this young talent. Giddey's 20, Chet is 19. Some of the other guys they drafted are obviously also like 19 and 20. So I think Shea might end up being another bargaining chip. It's like, okay, here we are. We're one piece away from really being great. We trade SGA, a 28-year-old Shea. That's my concern.
Which I think is very much in the realm of possibility. I mean, he's been the one that people have rumored as like, oh, he doesn't fit their timeline. Kind of like you're saying, might get a little unsettled and be like, I want to go somewhere I can win. Because he's, I think he turns 25 this season.
I don't know if he ever asks for a trade.
No, but similar to like how
he's like, I want to be here, but
similar to the Donovan Mitchell situation, like where it's just like, all right, like this is kind of running its course. It's time for us to transition.
Mm-hmm.
He is a candidate to move. But then again, he is only turning 25. So maybe you think like he'll be our older guy. He'll eventually age out. We'll have this next wave come in after him and they'll just replace him. So you never know. But it's definitely something to watch. But yes, Michael, I think he's an all-star.
And I think not even just all-star. If the durability is proven, I think has to be in the conversation every year as being one of the best players in the league.
I mean, yeah, he probably is. I mean, currently in the All-NBA conversation, absolutely.
And then my last take, and it's quick, is I'd be pretty bummed if the Rockets get Victor. I don't want them to get him. I noticed that they're the worst team right now. Are they the worst team?
They're tied with the Magic.
I just
Orlando getting him would be unreal.
But the Magic have played a slightly harder schedule. So
they're also, you can see they're definitely better. And they've had a lot of injuries. That team is notably better. I think the Rockets are probably towards the bottom right now for good reason.
I don't know. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because I don't just love Houston that much. I think it would be hysterical if he went to Orlando. They're just more fun locations than the Rockets.
I mean, if you look at the bottom of the league, and I'm excluding like the Kings, the Lakers, the Warriors, like I would like to see him in any of Orlando, Detroit. I do think teams like, I don't know, the Jazz are going to fall.
I think biggest
OKC we mentioned. But
I think the best possible place for Victor to end up is in Charlotte with LaMelo.
I agree. I think
and Victor becomes the face of that franchise, and LaMelo is the second best player on that team.
I think you're right.
I think it's the perfect fit.
Also-
Or unless someone else like does jump in the lottery, which we have seen, like one of these better teams jumps. I think that's definitely the best place.
The Miami Heat were tanking for Victor all along.
I think like if the, for example, even if like the Lakers pick is very bad and the Pelicans do get it, like, is that the best place for him?
No, they would. I think the Pelicans should trade Victor, the opportunity of drafting Victor for a boatload of role players and some more draft compensation in the future.
I think you get a ton of picks. I don't know. Or you keep him, you move Brandon Ingram, or you keep Brandon Ingram and you just play him next to Zion, let Zion basically be your center. I don't know. It's all very interesting to think about, but yeah, I don't know.
So I shat on the Rockets, but the point is,
I would rather another team get them.
Way more fun, and you can just keep extrapolating on really interesting. Like the Charlotte one, I didn't even think about, Luke. That would be really cool. I wouldn't love that either because I don't love.
Like, think about LaMelo's rookie year and how much coverage he got. I think if Victor was in Charlotte, it would turn into a larger market. I think they'd get more media coverage. I don't think it's an unattractive city to be in either, especially with Jordan as the owner. So.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. But
we talked about Houston being the worst team in the NBA. Jabari Smith Jr., who's on my fantasy team, is shooting 30% from the field. So when I watched him in the summer league, I think I remember saying his jump shot just looks really, really flat.
Yeah, and it is
very flat, and that's why he doesn't go in. So it'll be. I think when we were talking a little bit more about the draft, I think part of it was like Chet and Jabari are definitely going to be more projects, whereas Paolo is going to come in and look fabulous, which he has. So
yeah,
Paolo could be an all-star.
He could be an all-star this year. I honestly think he might end up being an all-star this year. He'll be like the last guy in the East.
Maybe. I mean, that's asking a lot out of a rookie. It's hard to keep up this level
of
play.
Think about all the fans in Orlando who are just dying to have anything good happen to them.
How many fans are in Orlando?
Enough to get Paolo voted into the All-Star game.
Maybe, but there's a ton of players in the Eastern Conference that are deserving.
Who are playing forward?
Giannis, Tatum. I mean, we do this every year. Someone always gets left off. Jimmy Butler.
When we get there, we'll get there. Jimmy Butler,
Kevin Durant
forward.
I'm just saying, there's enough guys where he'll probably get left off. But yeah, it's still a good story. But all right, we have been on here for a while.
I can't even tell how long we've been on here.
It's been like probably a little over an hour now.
This is what happens when there's no games on.
I know.
Yeah, no games tonight.
Yeah. Happy election.
What am I supposed to do with my life?
Vote as the NBA wants you to do.
I already dropped off my ballot.
Yep. I don't know. Cook dinner, sleep.
I should cook dinner. I probably should have planned that out.
That is what I'm about to go do, Luke. So I'm going to cut our listeners free, eat a little dinner, edit this puppy on the couch. But thank you for all of you for tuning in. Join us next time. This is the Hoop Troop Podcast.